So good morning. Today's daf is daf Yud Zayin in Yevamos. We are near the bottom of daf Tet Zayin and Mabet. And let me share my screen. And here we go. And yesterday, we concluded by noting that we would need to be concerned that a non-Jewish man in certain areas is potentially Jewish, meaning that if he were to marry a Jewish woman, the marriage would actually require a divorce. We've seen, in fact, we saw yesterday, the fact that when a non-Jewish man marries a Jewish woman, there is no marriage that applies. And that actually is one of the answers for Tosas's question is why might I think that there is a status of mamzerut? If if a non-Jewish man marries a Jewish woman, there is no biblical sin that's associated with that. And one usually thinks of mamzerut in connection with, sins that are punished very severely by the Torah. And so the answer is that is true, but one aspect of mamzerut may in fact be, or one way to understand mamzerut is where there is no marriage relationship or no possible marriage relationship between the two parents. And so that is one understanding. Now, of course, we do not in fact paskin that way. We do not say that if a non-Jewish man and a Jewish woman have children, that their children are mamzerim, that they have that quality. But indeed, rather, we say, as we had noted yesterday, that in fact they are halakhically Jewish. But what we're dealing with now is we noted that there are certain places where the 10 lost tribes settled, and so and if you have a Jewish person, if you have, a non-Jewish person from one of those locations, we need to be concerned that maybe that person was actually Jewish. And indeed, we're going to see that maybe we need to even be concerned that that person is a mamzer. Now, again, we don't paskin that way. We don't actually, we don't paskin that just being married to a non-Jew would create mamzerut. We'll actually see that in some of these places, we think that they may have engaged in other inappropriate behavior. But again, yesterday, we noted that marriage could actually require divorce if the groom was from one of those locations, even if the groom wasn't Jewish. And ordinarily, a non-Jew marrying a Jew does not require a divorce. There's no because there's no marriage in the first place, they can just simply separate. So now we're going to begin, by identifying the location. So this is fourth to last word on the second to last line on Tet Zayin and Mabet. Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana. Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana said, translating or explaining this particular verse, this verse from Melachim Bet, V'yanchem Ba'achlech uv'chavor nahar gozan v'arei madai, right? So this is describing where the king of Ashur, of Assyria, settled the exiled lost tribes. And it says that it was in Halach and Chabor and by on the river Gozan and near in the cities of Madai, of Med, which is current Iran. So what were these places? And now Rav Abba identifies them. Chalach ze Chalyon. That is the place called Chalyon. Chavor ze zo. And now we turn to Yud Zayin and Aleph. Zo Chadayav. That's Chadayav. So basically he's identifying. Obviously, it's hard to know exactly which location these may be today, but Nahar Gozan, and what's that? That's Zo Ginzak. That's the Ginzak. So Va'arei Madai, Zo Chamadan, V'charvoseha. So that's the cities of Madai referred to Hamadan and its neighboring towns. So V'amrila, and some people say that it's not the neighboring town, it's not the Hamadan, but rather it's Zonihar v'Chavroseh. It's Nihar and its neighboring towns. And Chavroseh man, what are those neighboring towns? So Amar Shmuel, Kerech Moshche, Chidke v'Dumkia. That these were Kerech, Moshche, Chidke, and Dumakia. And so those are the different towns. V'Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So again, what did we said yesterday? We said that the people in these towns, we have to be worried that they're Jewish, and as a result, we have to be worried that, in fact, marriage would apply if one of the men in this town married a Jewish woman. V'chulan lifsul, but Rabbi Yochanan v'chulan lifsul. But Rabbi Yochanan says that actually not only are they considered Jewish, but actually they are mamzerim. So if we take a look at Rashi, Ruban mamzerim, most of them are mamzerim. Shenitmeu aseres hashvatim ba'ovdos kochavim, that they married non-Jewish people. Ubneihen harehen kisraelim. And then their children are considered Jews because if the Jewish women married them, v'noag behen iser mamzerut, and then they would engage in inappropriate relationships, and so that as a result they became mamzerim. V'hein lo nizharu v'nasu as achoso bito v'harei hein mamzerim, that they would not be careful about not marrying their sisters or their daughters, and so as a result, they became actual mamzerim. So now that's the story. So Ki Amar Shekamei Shmuel, when this whole thing was said in front of Shmuel, so Shmuel clarified the halacha as we in fact see it, as that we know it. So Amar Li, Shmuel said to Rabbi Yehuda, who said this all before Shmuel, Bincha haba min Yisraeli karoi bincha. If a Jewish woman has a son, that son is called your son, meaning he's Jewish. But if your son comes from a woman who is not Jewish, who is in idol worship, then he is not your son. Ella b'na. Rather, he's her son. And so as a result, he's not Jewish. 1 second. So that's explaining that according to him, if a man from the 10 tribes married a Gentile woman, so then their children would be Gentiles and not Jewish mamzerim. And so as a result, that should indicate that given so many generations have passed, there would be there wouldn't be a reason to be concerned about that maybe you're marrying a Jewish mamzer. 1 second, va'ika banot. 1 second, but there were daughters that when among the 10 tribes of Israel that were exiled, and if they had any children, v'amar ravina shmamina ben bitcha haba min ha'oved kochavim koroi bincha, right? If your daughter's son comes from an idolatrous man, that's called your son. And so as a result, there would be still, every generation would have women, and all the women, who were Jewish, who had Jewish mothers, would also be Jewish mothers. And so wouldn't that result in potentially Jewish people existing? And so don't we need to have to be worried about maybe the marriage is actually a valid marriage? So Gamiri divinasa dahudara, it's true, yay, it's true. There's a tradition, a gemura, that the daughters of that generation, they were all torn. And if we take a look in Rashi, Nivka Rachaman, their uteruses were torn, Miliklot Zera Vinasu Akarot. So they had become effectively unable to have children. And so as a result, there was no concern of any children from the initial generation of women. And so as a result, all the children after the first generation were all not Jewish. And so as a result, according to Shmuel, who disagrees with Rav Asi, according to Shmuel, there isn't in fact any concern about marrying those non-Jews with respect to there being marriage. Obviously, you're not supposed to do it, but if you did do it, the couple would be able to separate without having to worry about getting a divorce. Okay, so Ikeda Amri. Alternatively, some people say Ki Amrisa Kamei de Shmuel, when Rav Yehuda told Rav Asi's ruling in front of Shmuel. So Amar Li Lo Zavu Misham Ad Asaum Ovdei Kochavim Gemurim. That it's, now it's not clear exactly who the third party is, but they did not move from there until they made all of them fully idol worshippers. So what does that mean? Well, let's do the citation. Shneamar b'Hashem bagadu kivanim zarim yaladu. Right? They betrayed Hashem because they had foreign children. They had stranger children. They had children that were not Jewish. And so as a result, what is that? This verse from Hosea indicating? So according to Shmuel, it's indicating that the powers that be within the Jewish community basically ruled that generation would be considered non-Jewish. So maybe they didn't in fact have, maybe not all the women were in fact akarot. They may not have all been unable to have children, but rather they were dictated by the Nevi'im of that time, determined that they would all be considered non-Jewish. And so as a result, there would not, according to Shmuel, be any concern with marrying those individuals. So Yosef, Rav Yosef, Achorei, the Rav Kahana. So there was now, we're going to, one of the places that we mentioned yesterday as being potentially a place where you have to worry about mamzerim, or the fact that maybe the people were Jewish because of things that happened to them, is this place called Tarmod. And so we're going to continue to tell us something about Tarmod now. So Yosef, Rav Yosef, Achorei de Rav Kahana. Rav Yosef was sitting behind Rav Kahana. Yosef, Rav Kahana, Kamei de Rav Yehuda, the Yosef Kamar. And Rav Kahana was sitting in front of Rav Yehuda. So he was teaching in front of Rav Yehuda. And again, Rav Yehuda was the one who was involved in the statement that we saw earlier yesterday, who was the one who said the statement in the name of Ravasi. So he was the one who was supporting this idea that maybe marrying these people in this location, they might still be Jewish, and so you have to be worried about marriage. So what does he say? So Asidim Yisrael de Yom Tova ki Charve Tarmod. And so Rav Kahana said that the Jewish people will one day have a great celebration when the city of Tarmod is destroyed. And again, because Tarmod were potentially mamzerim, and so the destruction of the mamzerim, we don't have to worry about that. That would be a wonderful day. So now the Gemara asks a question. V'hachariv, 1 second, Tarmod was already destroyed. So why didn't we get the party? So he Tamod have. No, it was not Tarmod that was destroyed, it was Tamod that was destroyed. So Rav Ashi Amar, and Rashi says, Hainu Tarmod, Hainu Tamod. 1 second, Rav Ashi says that they're the same place. Akapoli hu de mikbal. And it would, but in fact, there's another reason. So it wasn't fully destroyed because it would replicate, it would double itself. Charav mahai gisa, osim mihai gisa. Whenever one side of the city was destroyed, the other side would be rebuilt. Charav mahai gisa, osim mahai gisa. And whenever the other side of the city, the other side would be destroyed. So basically, it was a non-destructible city because it kept popping up. So as a result, that is why we never had the opportunity to have this celebration for the destruction of Tarmod. Okay, so Yosef Rav Hamnuna Kamei de Ula. So Rav Hamnuna was sitting in front of Ula because Havish Bishmaita, and he was questioning stuff. So Amar Ula said to him, Ma Gavra Uma Gavra. Wow, what a guy this is. Ilav de Harpanya Maase. If only he was not from Harpanya, because in fact, so Rav Hamnuna was apparently from Harpanya, and Harpanya was a city that Rashi says had tainted lineage. And so as a result, it's too bad that you are from Harpanya, because they may have been Mamzerim. So Aksif, so Rav Hamnuna became embarrassed by what was said. So Amar Alei, so Ula said back to him, oh, I see that you're embarrassed. This is not in the text, but the implication is the following: that I see that you're embarrassed. Well, one of the qualities, as we'll see in a moment, of people who are a mamzerim is that they don't get embarrassed. They have great brazenness, and so the fact that you are embarrassed to have been called somebody from Harpanya shows your sensitivity. So he said to him. So Ula said to him, Kesev Gulgalta Lahecha Yavas. Where did you pay taxes? So Amar Le Lefum Nahara. I pay taxes Lefum Nahara. And so Amar Le Im Kain Mipum Nahara. So it must be you are from Pum Nahara. So basically, Ula was saying, I thought that this person was from Harpanya, and as a result, maybe we had tainted lineage. That would be a shame because he was such a learned person who was asking great questions. But it turns, but in the end, the fact that Rav Hamnuna got embarrassed about it showed that he, in fact, was not a mamzer, because his behavior was consistent with a typical Jew. And so Ula inquired further and was able to determine that, in fact, he was from Pum Nahara. So my Harpanya, what is this? To what? Harpanya sounds like it might be a combination of words. So what is that hinting to? So Amar Rabbi Zera, Harsha Kol Ponimbo. It's a mountain to which everyone turns. Well, why does everyone turn there? Because even if you are not necessarily fit for marrying somebody with a pure genealogy, you could turn to Harpanya, because everybody knew that the people there had less than perfect genealogy, and so if you needed a spouse, they were either they were more desperate, or you could, if you were desperate, you'd be able to find somebody. The Masnisatana, and we learned in a brisa, Kol she'ein makir mishpachto, anybody who doesn't know where their family is from, doesn't recognize their family, V'shivto nifne l'sham, then that his tribe can turn to the city of Harpanya to find a mate. So Amar Rava Vehi Amuka Mish'ol, and it in fact is deeper, meaning that the people there are more problematic, and therefore, only if you're really desperate should you go there to find a mate. That is deeper than Sheol. And what Sheol is usually referred to, it can be the grave, or it could be Gehenna, and so it is that's how bad things are there. Shneimar miyad Sheol avdem mimavas egalem, right? So from the clutches of Sheol, I'm going to ransom them. From death, I will redeem them. Ve'ilu psul didhu leis lahu takanta. So whereas when it comes to Sheol, meaning hell, there's an opportunity for redemption. But when it comes to the psulim, the disqualifications of the people in Harpanya, there is no remedy. So that shows that Harpanya is even worse off than Sheol. So it highlights the fact that we have to be very careful about not avoiding the creation of mamzerim. So psule de Harpanya, mishum psule de Meshon. Now we're going to say, how do we know that the people in Harpanya were problematic? It's because they came from Meshan, and the people who had problems in Meshan, they effectively were kicked out of Meshan and they went to Harpanya. And where did the people in Meshan come from? Upsule de Meshan, mishum psule de Tarmod. The people in Meshan, they actually came from Tarmod. Psule de Tarmod, mishum avdei Shlomo. And as we saw yesterday, the people in Tarmod were, one of the views was that they were actually Shlomo's slaves, and then they were able to marry Jewish women, and so that created a tent because they were wealthy, even though they were slaves. And so as a result, they created tainted children, and those tainted children went from first started in Tarmod, then went to Meshan, and then went to harpanya. And that's what people say. Kaba Rabba Kaba Zuta Migan Migandar Ba'azil, right? Ba'azil Lish'ol. That both a large kav and a small kav, whether it's whatever kind um, of this is a hint to the disqualifications that one has. Whatever kind of disqualification one has, it all goes downhill to Sheol. Sheol Tarmod. From Sheol it goes to Tarmod. From Tarmod Mishan Laharpanya. And so we see that in fact the people in this community, they would all go. If you had a problem with your lineage, you would go to a place where more people existed with that problem. So that way you and yourself would be able to find somebody. And if anybody needed somebody to marry that had an issue, they would also be able to go there. And so we see that this is the process. And indeed, it's highlights, it's a sort of a race to the bottom, that when you have these kinds of situations, often people develop worse and worse habits. So hadron Allah chamesh esrei nashim, hadron Allah chamesh esrei nashim, hadron Allah chamesh esrei nashim. So now we've completed the first parak of Yevamos, and now of course we will turn back to this concept of Yibum. So we're off it for a day or so. We had a chance to rest our brains, and now we're ready to get some dizziness again. Now it's not quite as bad today as it has been on other days, but I think we'll be able to follow without too much of a problem. So let's take a look. So the first Mishnah is going to deal with the non-contemporary brother. Again, this was the 14th of the 15 cases that were dealt with in the first Mishnah of our Masechet, and that's the brother who was born after the other brother dies. So again, we have Reuven and Shimon are brothers. Reuven marries Rachel, but he dies without children. Shimon marries Shira and performs Yibum with Rachel. So now Levi is born after all that happens. So if now Shimon dies without children, based on what we saw in the first perek, right, he can't marry Levi, cannot marry Rachel, since he was born after Reuven died. And he can't marry Shira because she is Rachel's co-wife. So, if however Shimon had only done Ma'amar, we're going to see, then Levi is required to do Chalitza with Shira. So that's what we're going to see in our Mishnah. So let's take a look. So Ketzad Eishes Achav Shelo Haya Ba'olamo. What is this case of the where the wife is of a brother who was not in the around, of the non-contemporary brother? So Shnei Achim, we have two brothers, Reuven and Shimon. Umei Zechad Mehen, and one of them dies. Reuven dies without children. V'nolad lahen ach, and now a new brother is born, Levi. V'achar kach yibem hasheni es eshes achiv, and now Shimon takes Reuven's wife, Rachel, in Yibum, Umes, and now Shimon also dies without children. So, and Shimon had another wife as well, and we called her Shira. So Harishona, the first wife, namely Rachel, who was Reuven's wife, Yotz'a mishum eshes achiv shelo haya ba'olamo. She cannot marry Levi because she is a wife of a non-contemporary brother, meaning she was the wife of Reuven. Reuven died before Levi came around. So as a result, there's never a permission for Levi to marry Rachel. V'hashniya, and Shimon's own wife, namely Shira, mishum tzarasa, right? She is the tzara. She's the co-wife of Reuven's wife. And so as a result, she also is somebody who cannot be married by Levi. However, asa b'mamar, if Shimon had only done mamar, and as a reminder, ma'amar is the concept that rabbinically, biblically, remember, in order to marry somebody with Yibum, all you need to do is have sexual relations, but have intercourse. But but the rabbi said, we don't want that to be the starting point. We want there to be a statement of intention, and that will tie the two people together. And so the rabbis say that before Shimon can perform Yibum to Rachel, Reuven's wife, he needs to first say Mamar. He needs to first perform Mamar and say and dedicate himself as Rachel's new husband. And so as a result, if that were to happen, but the marriage itself, meaning that there was never the consummation of the marriage, well then, Shniya choletzes below misya bemes. Now, Shimon's own widow, even though she cannot marry Levi, the new brother. Why? So let's work it out, and we'll understand. So she can't marry she cannot marry Shira cannot marry Levi because maybe Shimon's performance of Ma'amar it tied Shimon to Rachel. So it wasn't a full marriage, but it was enough to make Shira a somewhat of a co-wife of Rachel. And since she's now somewhat of a co-wife, she cannot marry Levi. But she also doesn't just go free. It's not, we require chalitza. And the reason that we require chalitza is because Shimon did not, in fact, complete the marriage with Rachel. Rather, he only performed Mamar, so there's only a rabbinic marriage. So essentially, the rabbi said, listen, we have a rabbinic marriage here, and so as a result, even though biblically you could do either chalitza or yibum, we're going to require you to do chalitza. And so as a result, that is why Reuven's widow, Rachel, is unable to marry Levi, even though Shimon never completed the process of Ma'amar, of Yibum, because he only did Ma'amar. So now the implication of this is that, in fact, if Shimon had done nothing, so then maybe then Levi would have been able to do Yibum with Shimon's widow Shira. Okay, so now let's take a look inside. And so in the Gemara, and we're going to analyze this case. So Amar Rav Nachman, Rav Nachman is trying to understand what's this source? How do I know that there's a problem with a non-contemporary brother marrying the woman who Yibum was done to? So Mandatani Rishona lo mishtamesh. So there are two. First of all, there are two ways of reading the Mishnah. So not our Mishnah, but there are two traditions associated with the Mishnah. One is the one that we have, that one says that it's the first wife that is the one who is considered the wife that is. Let me back up. So we're going to we used in our Mishnah a reference to Harishona v'Hashniya. Now, in our Mishnah, it was clear that the Rishona referred to Reuven's former wife, Reuven's widow, Rachel, because we say Yotza Mishum Eishes Achiv Shelo Haya B'Olamo, because that's the one who is the wife of the non-contemporary brother, because Reuven died before Levi was born. And the Shniya referred to Shimon's own wife. Now, Rav Nachman is going to reference an alternative teaching where the Rishonah is referring to Shimon's own wife, and the Shniya is referring to Reuven's widow. So so the question is one of those languages, is one of those variants incorrect? So Mandatani Rishona lo mishtabesh, the one who teaches that it was the first wife that is the one that was Reuven's former wife and is not allowed to marry Levi because Levi is a non-contemporary brother. That is not a mistake. That is not a faulty language. And Mandatani Shniya lo mishtabesh. And even if you were to have taught it the other way around, not like our Mishnah, and say it was the second one that is referring to Reuven's widow, that also is not a mistake. How do we enable these two teachings? So we now turn to Yud Zayin Amabet. So Mandatani Rishona Lo Mishtabish, the one that says that it was the first one is not a mistake. Why? Because my Rishon. What does it mean that Rachel, Reuven's widow, was the first one? Rishona Lefila. She was the first of all the wives of the various brothers to become capable of having yibum done for her. She was the one who fell into the category of potential yibum. And even the one who says second isn't mistaken, my shnia l'nesuin. She was the second one to be married to Shimon. Shimon first married Shira, and then he married Rachel. Rachel, the wife, the widow of Reuven, his older brother, his brother, who died without any children. So one second, Milo Askina and Deibim va'achar kanas. One second, how do I know that maybe we're dealing with a situation where Shimon married Rachel before he married Shira? It doesn't make a difference when Shira married Shimon. The same rule applies. So you don't. It's not necessarily true that Rachel is Shimon's second wife. It could be the first wife. So Ella Maishnia, so we're going to revise it and say when it says why can Rachel be referred to as the second one? Because Shnia ben Nisuim, because she's married for a second time. And so because she had been married first to Reuben and then taken in Yibum by Shimon, so as a result, we can refer to her as the second wife. So the point is that even though our Mishnah referred to her as the first wife, we can consider her the second wife. So now the Gemara is going to attempt to derive the source for the non-contemporary brother. And once we've done so, we're going to confirm that Yibum only applies for paternal brothers. Okay, so Eishes Achiv Shelo Haya Ba'olamo Heicha Ksiva. Where does it say anywhere in the Torah that you can't have a non-contemporary brother perform Yibum? So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Amar Kra Ki Yeshu Achim Yachdav. When it says when the pasuk in Dvarim Kaf Hey pasuk Hey talks about Yibum, it says that the brothers are dwelling together. Well, Shahaisa Lahem Yeshivas Achas Ba'olam. It means that they are dwelling at the same time in the world, right? Parat La'eshes Achiv Shelo Haya Ba'olamo. That comes to exclude the case where one of the brothers wasn't around at the time that the other brother was married to the woman who is now the widow, who is a potential yibum. And yachdav, what do we learn from the word yachdav? Miyuchadim l'nachana, that the brothers all have to be joined in connection with inheritance. What does that come to exclude? Prat la'achiv min ha'em. So that means that yibum does not apply to maternal brothers. It only applies to paternal brothers. So Rabba Amar, achim min ha'av, yalif achva mibnei Yaakov. That no, that is not the source. It is not from Yachdav that we learn that it's only paternal brothers and not maternal brothers. Rather, we actually learn it from a Gzeira Shava of referencing brothers. Now, it's not actually, even though the word here in the Gemara says achva, it's really achim in both of the verses. It says in connection with ki yeshvu achim yachdav, right? As we saw earlier, that's in connection with Yibum, and then in connection with Yaakov's children, v'yomru shnei masar abadecha achim anachnu, right? We're all brothers. So we see that in fact, though, that word achim appears by both of them. So malahalan min ha'av v'lo min ha'em, afkan min ha'av v'lo min ha'em. Right, all in connection with Yaakov's sons, when they're talking to Yosef and they tell Yosef, they don't know it's Yosef, he's the viceroy of Egypt. When they tell the viceroy of Egypt that we're all the sons of one brother, of one father, we're all brothers, right? It's clear that they're all brothers only from a father and not from a shared mother, because they had 4 different mothers, right? There was Rachel, Leah, and then Bilhah and Zilpah. So as a result, they're not in fact maternal brothers, they are only paternal brothers. So just as that involves paternal brotherhood, so too when it says achim in connection with Yibum in Sefer Dvarim, so then that refers to also paternal and not maternal brothers. Well, 1 second. One second. There's another place where achim or brotherhood is mentioned, and that is in connection with Arias, because it says Ervas Eshes Achicha Lo Sigale. You're not allowed to reveal the nakedness of your brother. And so as a result, and there, your brother, we learn, also applies to maternal brother. So the Gemara explains, no, danim achim me achim. They ain't danim achim me achicha. No, but there's a very important difference. The word achim is in the first two cases, in the case of the brothers of Yaakov's sons, and in the case of Yibum, in both locations the word achim is used, and so we're going to learn achim from achim and not achim from achicha, because the case in connection with arayot involves the word achicha, right? Ervas eshes achicha. So isn't that a difference? That's an important difference. Well, 1 second, my nafkamina. Well, who cares about that difference? That's not a big difference. We've seen other Gzera Shabbos where you learn one thing from another, even if the word isn't even exactly the same, right? Hatana Deve Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael taught a Gzera Shabbat, the Shav HaKohen Uva HaKohen, that the Kohen shall return and the Kohen shall come. Zohu Shiva, Zohi Bia, that they really refer to the same thing, and therefore there was allowed to do a Gzera Shava there. And in that situation, they didn't even have the same word. So of course we should be able to learn a Gzera Shava of Achim from Achicha. So as we see throughout Shas, as we have this answer, Hani Mili Heka Deleka Midi Dedamile. No, when can you do things that are not, the words aren't exactly alike? That's when there's no other pasuk with the identical word that we have the opportunity to learn from. Aval Heka Deika Midi Dedamile Midedamile Yalfinan. But when there's two opportunities and we can learn a Gzera Shava from a word that is identical or a Gzera Shava from a word that is different, we will learn the Gzera Shava from the word that is identical. 1 second, but there's another word, another place in the Torah where it says Achim, V'leilif Achva Achva Milot, Diksiv Ki Anashim Achim Anachnu, because when it said with respect to Lot's relationship with Abraham, it says that we are brothers. We are brothers, the relationship between Lot and Abraham. So as a result, we should actually maybe say that the concept of Yibum would apply even to a nephew. Mistabra, no, it's more reasonable to say the approach that we were doing. Why? Bibnei Yaakov, Hava Leila Melef. It makes more sense to learn from the case of Yaakov, Mishum Demufni, because the word Achim there wasn't actually necessary. It was extra. Because we could have just said, the Torah could have just said that your servants are 12, the sons of our father, meaning it would be obvious that they were Achim if you say that we are all sons of one father. So Uksiv Achim, and therefore the fact that it said Achim, Shma Mina Lafnuye, the fact that it was in order to make it available for a Gzera Shava, and so therefore we're going to be fine. The Itzrach L'Michtav Achim. 1 second. The Itzrach L'Michtav Yachdav. So 1 second. Why? We now have two different teachings. Now the teachings are two different people, so it could be that they were arguing, right? Because Rabbah said we're learning it from a Gzera Shava of Achva, and Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Rav, said that we were learning the concept of only paternal brothers being covered by Yibum from Yachdav. So why do we need both of them? So now the Gemara explains that, in fact, we do need both the teaching of Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rav and the teaching of Rabbah because of the following. Because of Rahman Achim, because if we had only had the word Achim and only used that Gzera Shava, Haba Mina Leiliv Achva Achva Milot, I might have thought that we could actually learn it from Lot. Oh, I thought you said that Lot wasn't extra, and the brother reference to brotherhood in connection with the sons of Yaakov was extra. V'chitema lo mufne. And if you said that 1 second, maybe the brotherhood is with respect to Lot is not available because it was not an extra word. Loi afnuyim ifnei. 1 second, it actually really is available. Because the Torah could have just said that Abraham and Lot are re'im. They are friends. They are companions. But the fact that it wrote achim specifically, shma mina la'afnuya, maybe I would say that makes it available and extra. So as a result, Kazav Rachmana Yachdav. So we also need to teach the word Yachdav to tell us that Yachdav means from the father and not from the mother. So Hamiyuchadim Benachala, because they are joined in the fact that they all inherit together. So the Kazav Rachmana. So 1 second. So now let's go in the other direction. Maybe all we need is Yachdav, which was the teaching by Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav. Why do we need the Gzeira Shava that Rabbah taught? Because of Rachmana Yachdav, if in fact we had only said Yachdav, so Hava Amina de Miyachade Ba'aba Uve'ima. Maybe I would say that you need to have both a common father and mother. And as a result, it's only if you have both that you would do Yibum. So as a result, by also pointing us to the Gzeira Shava of Achim, to the sons of Yaakov, which is a situation where they are brothers from the father, but not from the mother. So as a result, we learn that Yibum only applies to brothers from a father and not brothers from a mother alone. So tzricha, and that's why we in fact need both of the teachings. 1 second. So why would you even think that you would need to have both? So we just said that the reason that we need the Achim Gzeira Shava is because if we only had Yachdav, I might have thought that you need to have both the father and the mother. So how would I come to that conclusion? How would I ever think that Yibum would be determined by the mother? Yibum benachala tala rachmana. It seems like when we said Yachdav, we were referring to inheritance. Benachala min ha'av, v'lo min ha'em hi. And inheritance depends only on the paternal relationship, not the maternal relationship. So why would I have even thought that Yachdav would mean both having the father and mother together if I didn't also have the Achim Gzeira Shava? Itzrich. No, in fact, I might have thought that it was the father and mother. Why? Because the whole concept of Yibum is so novel. The fact that a brother is going to be allowed to marry a sister-in-law, the Kamishtori Erva Gabe, that it actually permits a prohibited relationship, because a brother is never allowed to marry his brother's wife unless it's in the context of Yibum. That is the only context where it's permitted. Otherwise, even if brother one divorces a woman, the other brothers are not allowed to marry her. So so as a result, I might have thought I might have thought that the only time that we'll allow that is when it's a really close relationship that brothers have. That only when you have the special closeness of having a shared father and a shared mother, that's when I would allow Yibum. So tzricha, so as a result, that's why we need both Yachdav and Achim, and the Gzeira Shava of Achim, because I might have thought that we would only apply Yibum because it's so remarkable only in the context of the closest of brothers, but instead we say no, we're going to apply it even if they're just brothers from the father. So now that we've proven that we now turn to a new topic. And before we talk about this new topic, I want to just mention what the topic is by way of introduction. So we've mentioned it indirectly, but not directly, and that is this concept called Zika. Zika refers to the connection between a Yavam, the surviving brother, and the Yevamot, the widow of the brother who died without children. The question is whether the fact of Zika creates a legal connection between the Yavam and the Yevamot. So again, classic situation, Reuven and Shimon are brothers. Reuven dies without children. His wife Rachel, his now widow Rachel, becomes a Zika to Shimon. What does that mean? What is the ramification of that relationship? Now, from her perspective, it means that she is not allowed to go out and marry anyone else until either Yibum or Chalitza is performed. And obviously, if Yibum is performed, she also will need to be divorced from the person. So there are legal ramifications of being Zika, of being connected, of the connection between the Yavam and the Yevamot. But the question is how deep do those connections go? And we will see that there are two possibilities. We could say Yesh Zika, that in fact there is a depth to that connection with deep legal ramifications. But right now we're going to see that Rav Huna says Ein Zika, that there is no Zika, and that there are not deep legal connections. And now we'll see exactly the situation. So Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. Rav Huna says in the name of Rav, back into the Gemara, middle of the daf, a little bit below middle of the daf. It's at least in my edition, it's about 2 or 3 lines below Likutei Rashi on the right hand side. And so again, about fourth word in the line, fourth word from the beginning of the line, fourth word from the end of the line. So Amar Huna Amar Rav, Shomeres Yavam Shemesa. If you have a woman, again, Reuven married Rachel. Reuven dies without children. Rachel now becomes a Yevamah for Shimon, the Yavam, and now, unfortunately, Rachel dies. So, Mutter Be'ima, Shimon is allowed to marry Rachel's mother. Now, if Shimon had actually married Rachel, he would not be allowed to marry Rachel's mother. He would not, because you're not allowed to marry, even at different times, the mother of your wife, and a mother and daughter relationship. You're not allowed to marry even at different times. So Alma Kasavar Ein Zika. So we see that Rav Huna holds there is no Zika connection between the Yavam and the Yevamah that would result in ramifications for the Yavam. 1 second. So now the Gemara asks, Vilema, halacha kedivrei haomer ein zika. Why didn't Rav Huna just say that the halacha is that we say ein zika, that there is no bond? Because haba amar haki haba amina hanamili betray. Then I might have thought that only applied when the surviving brothers were Shimon and Levi. And that's why there wasn't a deep connection, because we didn't know which one would perform Yibum, and we didn't know which one would perform Chalitza. But in the situation where there's only Reuven and Shimon, I might have thought that we would say Yesh Zika, that in that situation when Rachel is the widow, and there's only one person who could do Yibum and could do Chalitza, so then maybe there's a deeper connection there between the two of them. So Aval B'chad Yesh Zika, maybe I would say that with one there is Zika. So as a result, that's why we needed to say that specifically the halacha, that if a woman is waiting Yavam, mutter and dies, mutter be'ima, because that applies whether there's one brother or many brothers. So, whereas if we were to just say Ein Zika, I might have thought Ein Zika with multiple brothers, but Yesh Zika with one brother. V'lema halacha kedivrei haomer Ein Zika afilu b'chad. There's an easy fix to what you just said, because he could have said that the halacha is like that. The halacha is that there is no Zika even if there's only one brother. Why not just say that? Well, ihochi haba mina afilu michayim. Well, then I might have said that maybe there is so much of a no connection that you could that Shimon would be allowed to go and marry Rachel's mother even while Rachel is waiting for Yibum or Chalitza to be done to her. So again, we have in the order, we'll call Rachel's mother Sarah. So Ruvain married Rachel. Ruvain dies without children. Now Shimon, the surviving brother, has the opportunity to do Yibum or Chalitza with Rachel. And instead, I might have thought, if we just said Ein Zika Afilu Bechad, I might have thought that, okay, right, there's no Zika, even with one brother. So Shimon, the one brother, can now decide, you know what? I'd rather marry Sarah rather than marry Rachel. And so as a result, I'm going to marry Rachel's mom, Sarah, and now I won't have to do any kind of Yibum or I won't have to do any kind of Yibum or Chalitza, because now the whole concept won't apply to me because I'm prohibited to marry Rachel. So essentially, I can create for myself this prohibition by marrying Rachel's mom, Sarah. So Kamash Milan. So that's why Rav Huna teaches us specifically of the case La'achar Misa in. Only after death is Shimon allowed to marry Sarah, Rachel's mom. Mechayim lo, but as long as Rachel is alive and there's a need for Yibum or Chalitza to happen to her, he is not allowed to marry. Shimon is not allowed to marry Rachel's mom. Mishum de'asar levatal mitzvahs Yevamot, because you're not allowed to negate the mitzvah of Yibum, meaning that he had a mitzvah to do either Yibum or Chalitza. This is what Shimon had a mitzvah to do, either Yibum or Chalitza with Rachel, who was Ruvain's widow. And now he has avoided that by marrying the widow's mom, Sarah. So that is going to be a problem. Okay, so now we're going to challenge, let's have a very brief challenge here of this concept of Ein Zika, because maybe we learned a Mishnah that seems to suggest otherwise. And we're going to have three challenges. I guess we had already two challenges, right? One was to say, why didn't he just say Ein Zika? The second was to say, why didn't he say Ein Zika even when there's only one brother? And now we're going to challenge from a Mishnah that we're going to learn on Daf Mem Tet Amud Aleph. Okay, but we're going to resolve that as well, and then we'll be done for the day. So Tanan, Yevimto Shemesa Mutter Ba'achosa. That 1 second. If you have a Yevamot who dies, you're allowed to marry the sister. Doesn't that imply Ba'achosa in Be'imalo? Doesn't that imply that you're allowed to marry the sister of that person? So again, let's do Reuven is married to Rachel, Shimon, and Shimon is the brother, the surviving brother. So now Reuven dies without children. Before Shimon has a chance to do Yibum, Rachel dies as well. Rachel's sister Leah is allowed to marry Shimon. Okay, so the implication is Ba'achosain. Yes, Reuven's allowed to marry Rachel, Leah's sister. Leah, Rachel's sister, but Sarah, Rachel's mom, he's not allowed to marry. Isn't that the right implication from this Mishnah that we'll learn on Daf Mem Tet Amud Aleph? So no, that's not. No, in fact, the rule is also applying to a mother. And the reason that we specifically taught about a sister in the Seifa of the Mishnah is because in the Reisha of the Mishnah, we're talking about sisters. And Ishto Shemesa Mutter Ba'achosa, right? If one's wife died, you're allowed to marry her sister. Ba'achosa in Aval Be'imalo. But in that situation, you can marry her sister, but you cannot marry her mother. So again, if back to our Reuven and Rachel situation, where Rachel's sister is Leah and Rachel's mom is Sarah. So now instead of Reuven dying, Rachel dies. Now if Rachel dies, so Reuven is allowed to marry Leah, Rachel's sister, but he is not allowed to marry Sarah, Rachel's mom. So Tahavula Isura Doraisa. because the wife's mother is a biblical prohibition. So Tananami Seifa mutar ba'achosa. So as a result of the fact that in the Resha of that Mishnah, we talk about a wife dying and being allowed to marry the sister. In the end of the Mishnah, we will also talk about a sister, even though in actuality the person is allowed Shimon, who is the Yavam, who was supposed to marry Rachel, but then Rachel dies before he has a chance to do so. So he is not only allowed to marry Rachel's sister Leah, but he is also allowed to marry Rachel's mother Sarah. And so now we have gone through in detail the halacha associated with a ein zika, that Rav Huna says in the name of Rav that there's ein zika. Tomorrow we're going to introduce the other side of the argument, and Rav Yehuda will say that a Yavam cannot marry the mother of a Yevamah who dies before a Yibum, because he says ein zika. So stay tuned for the ein zika discussion. And again, this is an interesting and new topic that we have, that we're now introducing, this concept of Zika, that once the brother dies without children, so the woman that remains, she becomes on some level connected to the other brothers. And the question is, what are the halakhic ramifications of that connection?
Thank you, Rabbi. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Thank you.